Another thing we wanted to just touch upon is the workplace and how today's workplace is filled with people working from various different generations, right? From your baby boomers to your millennials. And Jean, if you could just talk a little bit about how that impacts learning programs and how you develop learning programs. And do you find that different generations actually use technology differently? And is that a challenge when you're actually developing your learning programs?
Yeah, you know what's really interesting, and there's this great book called Generation Me that's been updated recently, and it really does talk about the reality of the millennial. It's a database, research-based report, by the way, versus what we feel or think about it, because we all tend to generalize, and I think we generalize too much about, each generation. But, what I'd like to say about it is that individuals are individuals at the end of the day. You can do some generalizations, some characteristics of that. But the interesting thing for me is even less generational and more about just having different audiences that you're serving at large. Because when I think about diversity is about everything. It's about different ages, different social economic backgrounds, different viewpoints based on that, different educational backgrounds in different spaces that you live in at work. The way a financial person thinks about a problem and the way a technologist thinks about a problem are two completely different spheres, right? And their ability to communicate and talk to each other sometimes is challenging, right? Let's face it. So what we try to do at Cisco to try to counteract that is one, build diverse teams, because we find that the more we bring people together from all kinds of different backgrounds, what it does is it generates, by definition, more innovation, by definition, broader understanding of what's going on out there in the market. Because if you have a diverse group, then you start to represent the world a little better, which is our big belief, is that how can we possibly understand what's going on in the world if we don't look like the world, if we are not representing the world? So while we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, there are many of us at Silicon Valley who have chief diversity officers who help us to come up with strategies to both recruit and then bring on people of all these different diverse thinking and backgrounds and education and cultural and and men and women of all ages, because it's important to have having all young people. Believe me, I ran a company with all young people, and that could have its own set of challenges. Running a company with all one type of anything, by definition, puts you down a deep dark hole, because what you end up doing is you end up making assumptions about things because everyone's thinking the same way and no one's challenging the concepts that you're bringing forward, whether it's in learning or whether it's how you run your business or whether it's how you think about the public or the problem you're trying to solve. So for me, if you can, through the learning organization and through the HR organizations, help the company understand the value of diversity, and then through that, what happens is you end up with not what I would think is a more homogeneous environment, but a more understanding environment about all the different implications of all your choices. And by doing that, you end up in a much better place, right? It's a more challenging place to manage, because now you have to deal with people who are willing to challenge you because they see things differently. But it is also a much better place to be in terms of creating an innovative environment where people start to get used to this idea that they might put an idea forward, they get shot down. God forbid, right? God forbid they're in an environment that's creative and innovative. You're going to put up 80 different ideas, and you might go after 3 to 5 at most. So that means by definition a lot of stuff's going to fall away to the wayside, and you need to be able to select those things based on a good broad view of the picture. And I'd say in terms of how they learn, it's very, very individualized. If you take somebody, for example, who is a deep expert on something, they tend to want to do more stuff on their own. That's one thing I can generalize on. They tend to be more, sort of, let me learn it at my own time, my own pace, and my own way, through any tool you can give me that gives me access to that information. People that are just beginning generally like more structure. how you want to serve up that that architecture and structure. You have to, by definition, serve it up virtually, but some people do still want to go to a classroom. It might be served in a cloud, but you sometimes you do have to serve up a classroom because they need that structure to learn that topic if they're just beginning at those early stages. And then you have people in between that just sort of challenge all the status quo on everything you think and believe about, who likes what. So I would say we should spend less time probably trying to characterize certain groups and certain disciplines and more think about the general diversity that you have to accommodate and making sure you can, in fact, accommodate all of that.
Addie, what are your thoughts on how different generations learn?
I go back to our two girls, which are very different in terms of learning and the opportunities they have than I did. I go back to theory of relativity. I learned it in a classroom on a piece of paper. I didn't understand it really till much later when I actually saw a video. And I was in a lab, and I think that we learn it in a much more abstract way. Today the opportunities are tremendous in terms of the way they learn. And either through gaming or through technology, I think we are really learning in a much more interesting, and much better, much deeper way. So, but I think the new generation has something, and it's most generational. And us older folks, I think we forget to take a risk. We forget to ask why. We forget to be curious. And the new generation always has this amazing energy and ability to ask why, and to question, and to be curious. And without them, we are not going to evolve. We are not going to survive, because we are so set in our ways. It's so hard to change it that we need that new generation coming in and moving us forward. But I do want to talk a little bit about diversity when it comes to women in the technology field, because it doesn't matter if you're young or old with generation. We don't have enough women in engineering. We don't have women in technology. When we look at numbers of when I went to college, the numbers have declined. The women are consumers of technology and not contributors. And that is a serious problem, because when you look at it as consumers, we buy 90% of the technology goods, but we are only contributing to the design a few percentage of it. When you look at the technology space, women are not contributing. They're not involved, they're not in there, they're not coming in as engineers, they're not coming in as IT people. And I think that we are losing the whole perspective. It doesn't matter which generation you get in the tech sector. We are a lot more kind of left brain than right brain, and we are not designing with all of our brain and our heart. And I mean that because I think as innovators, responsible innovation requires women, because they bring that perspective. And that perspective, when it gets lost, we will do more innovation to address issues of the left brain than the right brain. So I just advocate that as you guys look at the women coming into the workplace, and if you are engaged with women, to try to promote getting women in the technology sector. We need them. The private sector needs them. Governments need them. The UN need them. We need more women. We need more girls. They need to come into the STEM space, and they need to begin to create the new world. So,
Robert, do you want to comment?
Yeah, so just a couple of things. I think if you think about what Jean and Addie are saying, I would add the same theme, that it's not so much about emphasizing the differences across the generations or across male, female, or across age, as it is emphasizing a conversation amongst those entities. You see what I mean? To where each part of the group has an equal voice. So I'm with Addie that women don't have an equal voice yet. There's a lot of people working on it. We're working on it at Ketchum. We are 70% female and 30% male, but our leadership team is mostly male. So we're working at it pretty hard to try to get female and male voices to have equality in terms of conversation. But also within generations, PR is a very young industry. A lot of young people come out of school, don't know what to do, so they go into PR. And what we've done is we've said that we are going to require that conversation to be across all ages within Ketchum for the following reason. We're using a rule of thumb that says if you're older than 35, you're still learning what the internet is. If you're younger than 35, you probably grew up with it. It's like, second nature. And so we're specifically trying to get a conversation across those over 35 years of age with those under 35. And the perspective that we bring is the older people have been in PR longer, and they have a good sense about what works and doesn't work from a human standpoint in public relations. At the same time, they're not so savvy on the internet and social media. And the younger people coming in, as younger people are, they're there to challenge. Like Eddie was saying, they're to challenge new ideas, push, etc. But they are very savvy on the use of these new technologies. So by getting that conversation together and say, come on, let's share what we've got best from our age group and our length of time in the industry, that's where I think we get the most outcome.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing that's common across all groups is, best way to learn is by doing. So injecting learning by doing is part of your overall methodology and process. Anywhere you can do that, you're going to get much better outcomes, much better results. And, finding ways to do project-based learning, that's what the schools have all learned. That's what certainly the industry has all learned. Finding ways to inject that into your formal learning programs, and any chance you get, you'll get a guaranteed better results. Doesn't matter what age or class or whatever kind of worker or learner you're talking about. That's just a fact.
Yeah, if I could respond briefly to that, we use a model at Ketchum called head, heart, and feet. If you're going to learn something, you need a clear concept for the head. You need to understand what it is you're learning. For the heart, you need to care about it. You need to know why it's of value for you, for the community, for others. And then feet, you need to know what to do with it. Not a whole big book, but a first couple of steps. So we say you haven't learned until you've got head, heart, and feet all involved.